Good morning. Off hours. How's everybody doing? I see that most people here, I think, came through you, Ali. So I'm Marie Poulin. I'm here with Ali Abdaal. I'm so excited. Ali is a doctor and YouTuber, productivity nerd like myself, also a Notion user. He's going to show us the various ways that he's been using Notion to study, to organize his life, to organize his videos. I know a lot of questions have come in, and I just want to do some quick housekeeping. If you've never been to an office hours before, if you've got any questions as we go along, pop them into the ask a question below so they don't get lost. I'll try to keep my eye in the sidebar just in case any pop up in there as well. We're going to lean toward the student productivity, but I know there's lots of non-students here too. And I think Ali has some amazing productivity tips beyond just studying. So let's see where the conversation takes us. And Ali, why don't we kick things off and you can give us a bit of a tour of your space.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it. So if I switch over to tab, can everyone see my screen?
Beautiful. Yep.
Yes? Okay, cool. So you can see that. So I'll just go briefly through a quick tour of the various things that I use Notion for, and then we can dive into the Q&A to see what people are asking questions about. Does that sound all right?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So let's start with the video thing, because I think this is the least interesting Notion. And I think in the session that you did with Thomas Frank, he covered it extensively and also in much more detail. I've kind of taken bits of his method and kind of made it try to simplify it a little bit. So essentially here, what I've got is
wow,
like all the video ideas that are in progress in some way or another. So this is the Kanban board feature of Notion, and sort of if I've got an idea for a video, it starts out in this sort of section with no status, and then the kind of vague idea is that we move it along as writing in progress, filming, editing, ready for publication, and published. This started off very neat. We only had like 4 columns, idea, draft, in progress, and published. But then over time, as my team has expanded and as I've gotten more kind of bits in Notion, I've tacked on other various elements to this. So now we've got all sorts of columns everywhere. And that's one of the things that I really like about Notion, that you can start off really simple and then your setup can evolve over time. Mm-hmm. And so I don't really use this much anymore. What I've got is I've converted it into different views. So firstly, we've got the sponsored videos view, which is all the sponsors that I've got booked for the next few months. And these are the most important videos because these are the only ones that actually have deadlines. And so some of these I'm going to film later tonight. Some of them I'm going to film over the weekend. The ones from January, February, March, we need to actually come up with ideas for. So that's kind of what we've tagged them with. So this is a sneak peek of what's coming up on the YouTube channel. Then I've got another one that has I've got a second YouTube channel called Appendix, which is basically for medical educational videos. So things like how to study for medical exams, how to prepare for life on the wards, things like that, like very niche medical stuff. And these are various videos that are all half edited and half need me to put them together. And this is just a general table full of all the different ideas. So anytime I have an idea, it goes into this videos thingy. And then over time, if I've got like some time randomly going into this bit, what I do here is I've got this little dashboard that has links to all these various bits that are just, productive things I could be doing if I've got a spare 10 minutes on the toilet, or if I'm, standing in line somewhere waiting to do something. I can kind of click on these. And so I might click on videos and I might go through how I edit photos for Instagram. Okay, cool. And then I'll take some notes about that and kind of talk about the Peter McKinnon presets that I use. I also use Gypsy Lust presets, links to the above. And I just kind of draft out what I'm going to talk about in the video. And then later on, when it comes to filming a video or deciding what to film, instead of trying to do it from scratch, I've got this whole kind of database of ideas that I can pick from. And this is kind of, this is Tiago Forte's idea in his building a second brain thing of how you don't want to be starting from, what's the word? I think the abundance mindset. So you want to start from a place of abundance where you've got so many ideas that you can just kind of run with rather than starting with a blank slate. So that was sort of the video side of it. Should we continue, or should we answer questions at this point? What do you reckon, Marie?
I think we could keep going. I know a lot of the questions are a little bit more related on the student side, but I say we go through and then we can take a break and check the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. So that was sort of point number one for project management, so traditional project management use case. And then point number two is using Notion as a second brain, hat tip to Tiago Forte and all of his stuff. And the two ways that I use Notion in particular for this are firstly, what I call the residence calendar, which I've made a YouTube video about that I'm sure someone can link in the chat if they really want to. And what the residence calendar is a free-for-all list of all the content I consume that resonates with me. I wrote this like 6 months ago. I haven't read that in a while. And so the idea is that anytime I come across something good that resonates with me, then I will share it using the iOS share extension or using the Chrome web clipper or whatever into Notion. So this morning, yesterday, November 19th, when was that? 3 days ago, I was actually listening to this episode with Tiago and Dave Perel, who has this really good writing course called Rite of Passage that I've taken as well. And I thought this podcast resonated with me. And so I shared it while I was driving, stopped the car at a traffic light, shared it to Notion. So I'm going to call this Tiago podcast with Dave Perel. And I sometimes like to tag it with podcast. It was about content creation, a bit of productivity, a bit of writing. And this just makes me happy because I love tagging stuff, even though I almost never actually return to the tags. And then the idea is that over time, I developed this kind of library of things that I've enjoyed reading or listening to or watching. And if I do need to, for example, make a video about productivity, I can kind of find all of my productivity related bits that I've had resonate with me over the years and can just kind of pick from them. So building a second brain had a lot of tags when I took that course, because I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah, nothing particularly fancy here. Dave Perel, don't learn to code, learn to automate. And so sometimes what I do is when I share stuff to Notion, I add a few quick notes about kind of the specific bits of that resonated with me. So this was a note that I added, definitely covers some of what I mean by learn to code. And this was a blog post that I read recently. When was it? November the 18th. And so I just shared it to Notion so that next time I come around to creating content about stuff, I'll be able to pick it. And finally, this is really helpful because every week I write an email newsletter, and in that I share a few links to interesting things that I've discovered that week. And so what I can do is I can just think, what did I discover this week? And just kind of look through my resonance calendar. And then I can link to this podcast, which I'll probably do on Sunday. I'll link to this blog post because that was good. And I'll link to this Medium post that I wrote about how great is just good repeatedly. And I read that on November the 18th. So does that all make sense?
Yeah, it's great. How often are you coming back here and kind of looking at old stuff that you've added?
So normally it's on a once a week basis when I'm writing my email newsletter to kind of pick the favorites for that week. And when I do that, then I'll tend to just kind of tag them in bulk. But I've also found this is helpful. So for example, if I know I'm going to be doing a video about, productivity or about study tips or about motivation, then I'll have in the back of my mind that I know I've got some stuff on it about that topic here somewhere. And one idea that Dave Perel says when it comes to writing is that the more of this kind of second brain you can build up, the more sources you can then quote when you're writing something or making a video. And it makes if you're writing a blog post and quoting from 5 different sources, everyone reads that and think, wow, you must have done so much research for this. But actually you've just picked the bits that you've picked up over a 6-month period and you're just kind of copying and pasting them. So I think that's a really good systematic way of creating content, which is kind of the business that I'm in. So yeah.
Awesome. Love it. I think some people were asking about a template for that. I think you did create a template for your resonance calendar, didn't you?
I did. It should, in theory, be on the Notion public templates gallery thing.
Cool. Just wanted to flag that if people did want to check that out.
If someone can find a link to it, then I can't actually share this one specifically because there are too many content blocks in it, and it goes over the limit. Therefore, it reaches some kind of error message. But the one on the Notion website should be blank, and you can start adding your own stuff to it.
Perfect.
Okay, so that was kind of one way in which I sort of use Notion as a second brain. The other one is what I like to call the idea refinery. And this is sort of like the video thing. but it's not necessarily for video ideas. It's just ideas in general. So, for example, on November the 20th, I came across this. I think this was some kind of advice about gratitude, and the author of the blog post or the book or whatever said that at various points in the day you want to be asking yourself, if this isn't nice, I don't know what is. As just like a really nice phrase to encourage us to be grateful to the things that we're doing in our lives. And so when I came across that, I was like, ooh, this is a really good idea. So I put it into this idea refinery, and then at some point I will drag it into here, and then I'll kind of turn it into an email newsletter. And then once I've emailed it, it'll go in this column. And then once I've turned it into a blog post, then it will go into this column. So this is sort of a kind of, these are ideas. So for example, this is unlikely to be a video idea by itself, but who knows, maybe it could be, and then it would go into this video column over here. So I just like to have all these captured, so that usually, again, when I'm sitting down to write my weekly email newsletter, instead of going with a blank slate and thinking, oh crap, what do I write about today, I kind of go down this list and think, okay, let's talk about this information diet thing, or let's talk about this gratitude thing, or let's talk about this wall of big ideas thing. And I've also kind of got this link to the Resonance calendar, which means that I can immediately see where this idea came from, and it came from this episode of the My First Million podcast. So then I can click on that, and I can be like, okay, this was the podcast, and then I can reference it when I'm talking about the topic. So it's quite a nerdy way of organizing ideas, but again, it just comes down to this idea of systematic creativity and systematic content creation, which makes it easy to create content when you've got a full-time job and you need to get stuff done efficiently.
Amazing.
So moving on, that was the second brain use case. Then we've got a kind of, I've recently, over the last few weeks, started to use Notion to organize various bits of my life. So the two that I've started doing more regularly are this idea of a daily highlight, which is something I read about in a book called Make Time by...
Yes, I'm reading that now.
Yeah, good. That's great. So one of their key ideas is that you should have a highlight for the day. So it would be, what do I want my highlight of the day to be? And they say either based on urgency or satisfaction or joy. And so the highlight that I actually put for today was to film this video that I'm doing that's sponsored by Brilliant that I need to get out for next week. So that needs to be on the list for today. And then I just put this in there. Technically, you're not really supposed to have two, but I sometimes like to put down kind of calendar events that I know I'm going to be doing. And then once I film this video, I'll have ticked my daily highlight, and that will be my highlight done. I also sort of like to have this list of few things. Other than the highlight, it would be nice to do this. So for example, what was it yesterday? Well, no, yesterday on the 19th. So I had to make this poster for a conference that I was at today. I had to edit this video for Skillshare, and then CBDs are case-based discussions for ePortfolio, which is this tracking online thing that you have to do as a doctor to show that you're up to date with medicine and things. Prepare for my home supervision. Home means physiology, so I've been teaching physiology to medical students and to mark a few essays. So I didn't end up doing that, but I managed to do these other things. So occasionally, if I feel like it, I'll go through and strike them through just so I can have a record of the stuff that I've done. And I've kind of been trying to do this on a semi-regular basis for the last few weeks. And since I've started doing this, I've actually kind of ticked off my daily highlight fairly regularly. So I found it's actually been a genuinely useful productivity tip that I got from this book.
I like it, the idea of you're sort of pre-planning a way that you're going to win the day. It's like you're deciding in advance. I really like that idea.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes if I forget to do it by the end of the day, I'll just put a daily check-in anyway, and I'll tick off something that I know I've done for the day. I feel better.
Yeah,
it's just really nice, kind of seeing this long line of ticks, even though I've been cheating a few times. I think on this one, I cheated because I made a start on my poster for the conference, but then at 9 p.m. I decided I was gonna put that as my daily highlight, and then. But I think that's one of the nice things about Notion is that it just makes it such a joy to tick things off and to put stuff into the system that it encourages these healthy, productive habits. So that was the daily thing. And the other thing I sort of tried doing after reading GTD, getting things done, is this idea of weekly reviews. So I've got a weekly review template, but I don't think I've ever done this well enough. So if I do a new one today, I'd say weekly review already, and I'll click my weekly review template, and then boom, we've got process, review, and reflect, which is sort of loosely based on Getting Things Done by David Allen. And so I've got this checklist of things like clear my desk, process Gmail inboxes, process all these various bits, and then I'll review my upcoming projects. And then in theory, I would kind of reflect on the week, but I've just this bit of clearing my desk and processing my inboxes, it just takes so long every single time that I never really get down to this review. Don't know if you can relate to that, Marie.
Yes, I can.
So yeah, this is sort of more in an ideal world, I'd be doing weekly reviews every week, and I know I should be, but I just I've done 3 since August, so it's not going so well. And then to nearly complete the tour, next I've been sort of using Notion for health, and there's this website julian.com where this guy has got this really good sort of the science-backed guide to how to build muscle that I've been following. It's kind of semi-loosely, and in that he sort of shares different workout plans that you should be doing, and in a very prescriptive fashion. So I absolutely love being told what to do in this sort of fashion. So what I've done is I've converted his workout guide thing into a workout tracker on Notion. And so the idea is that this is kind of all of the workouts I've done since 23rd of September. Not very many because I've been kind of slacking on the gym front. But the idea is that you alternate between A, B, and C days. So you go ABC, ABC, ABC. So the next time I go to the gym is going to be a B day. So B day, that sounds weird. So what I'll do is I'll go for B, which is just legs and pickup. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but that's what he calls it. And then it filters it and shows me exactly what I need to do in what order. So for example, on the 25th of October, I did a Smith machine squat thing, but I had a lot of pain in my groin and therefore I didn't do anything. And this just allows me to kind of track that, because the main idea with muscle growth is that you want to be doing progressive overload. You want to be increasing the weight a little bit every time you're at the gym. And so just having this in this sort of table, A, is just kind of nice because I'm the sort of nerd that loves adding data to stuff and it makes me feel good. But it also means that instead of randomly kind of screwing around at the gym, I actually have a plan because I know I just need to do a little bit more than I did last time. So this has been like a nice way of actually tracking my workouts. And I'm hoping that at some point I'll have like a really long list and then I can make a YouTube video out of it, because at the moment it's a bit pathetic. A workout in the last 2 months.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then finally, not that, this one. Finally, let's talk about Notion for studying. So I guess this is what a lot of the questions are going to be about. So HOM is, again, it's short for homeostasis, which is what the physiology course at Cambridge University is called for some reason. And that's what I teach to medical students every Thursday evening. So actually I can get rid of all that stuff. And what I've done is I've made a little database with all the different lecture series. So we've got nerves, muscles, heart, lungs, kidneys, hormones, and thermoregulation. And so let's take nerves as an example. I haven't looked at this in a while. Now there's a few things going on here that we can kind of go into. Let's start with the basics. So these headings here are the different lectures that we had in the nerve series. And what I've done is I've put a few brief notes under each one, but the idea is that I'm not taking notes just for the sake of summarizing, because summarizing notes is a complete waste of time. Instead, I'm only writing down stuff where the act of writing it down is going to help me synthesize information in some way. So for example, in lecture 1, Introduction to Physiology, I've been doing medicine for 8 years. I didn't really need to write anything for that. So I just kind of wrote a quick line about what the lecture was about. The next one was about control systems. So I wrote a little bit about ballistic control, because it's not something I think about very often. And somewhat interestingly, I think my favorite feature of Notion for studying is the toggle thingy. So you can get that by putting in that greater than symbol, and spacebar gives you a toggle, which means you can write a question here. And then you can toggle it, and then you can write the answer here. And this is incredibly useful because one thing that I go on about, like I preach about all the time, is this idea of active recall, which is the most efficient study technique. And active recall just means testing ourselves. So rather than rereading our notes, which is a total waste of time, we should instead be testing ourselves on the things that were in our notes without looking at them. And so what this does is it means that anytime I want to write something, I turn it into a question and I put the content inside a toggle box. So what is positive feedback and why is it bad for us? I would look at that and think, okay, what was I referring to there? And I think I was referring to the concept of how sometimes like positive feedback means a change in a system causes further changes to the system. Therefore, if you were to lose some blood, positive feedback would mean you lose some more blood and then some more and some more, and that would be bad. So yeah, the initiating stimulus causes more of the same. Flywheels operate on positive feedback. This was just a little reference to some business terminology that I made. And examples of positive feedback in the body. Again, so this is a toggle box within a toggle box. So when I see that, I'm going to be thinking, okay, I need to actively recall. I'm not going to just untoggle this and read what I said, because that's going to be a waste of time. I'm going to actively think and try and dredge that information up from my memory. And then only once I've done that will I look at the answer and think, okay, blood clotting, childbirth, and nerve signals. These are some good examples of positive feedback. Does that all make sense so far?
Yeah, it's great. I think people are excited to hear about that.
Yeah, so I found the toggle thing really useful. Another thing that I find really useful is, so again, I'm just writing a few brief notes usually for stuff that I didn't know or stuff that I needed reminding of. But if I come across a topic that takes a little bit more effort to understand, or that I know is a bit of a tangent, I'll turn it into a page. So for example, this one is a page on membrane structure, so let's go into that. And over here, I've gone through several different resources and tried to come up with the story of how cell membrane structure was discovered, because this is the sort of stuff that they like to do at Cambridge, where instead of just asking us what goes on in human physiology, a lot of it is about kind of how that was discovered, what experiments were done, that sort of stuff. And so through using various resources, I kind of made my own notes about this, because I couldn't find a summary anywhere. But this is sort of a tangent. It's not really directly relevant to the lecture. It's a bit of a tangent, and therefore I put it inside a page. I think initially for this, if I can remember correctly, I actually wrote everything kind of out over here. But again, one of the nice things about Notion is that if I were to create a page here, so page, random page, and I like adding icons to things just because it makes me feel pro.
Happy.
What I can then do is I can think, okay, there's a bit of content here that I don't actually need in this page, so I can just take it, I can drag it, where's the draggy thingy, and I can shove it into random page. And now it's been collapsed into this page, so when I click on it, it retains all of its structure. And I find that to be a really helpful way of keeping my kind of main page fairly tidy, and hiding a lot of the complexity away behind pages. So for example, here's one about the Nernst equation, which is one of the common equations in physiology. And this is stuff with example calculations hidden inside a toggle, with some more questions here hidden inside a toggle. So this is the sort of stuff that if I had it in my main document would just make everything look a little bit untidy. Plus I know the Nernst equation off the top of my head, so I don't really need it, which is why I've shoved it into this page. And the rest is much of the same thing, kind of a mixture of toggles, a mixture of pages. These are screenshots from the lecture slides, which I thought would be useful to have there. And occasionally I like to use, something like the Notion callout feature, which it just adds a little bit of, it just breaks up the wall of text. I'm not a fan of walls of text, so I like to break it up with structural elements just so it looks a bit prettier. And it kind of goes back to this thing that the more pleasurable it is to use an app, the more likely we are to use it. And because Notion is an inherently productive app, I'm never wasting time when I'm on Notion. I really value the pleasure factor of Notion. That's also sounds really weird.
No, I totally get it. I never felt that way with other productivity systems and project planners and.
Yeah. So that is kind of concludes the main tour. There is this other aspect of it, which is where I've made a separate database of essays. So essays are things that we have to, yes, so yeah, so we have to do various essays, and so what I've done is, I have made. Let's hide my students' names because that's probably not legit. It's only the first names. It's fine. And so I've written out various essays from different lecture series, and let's take this filter off so I can see all of them. Yeah. So I went through loads of past papers from previous years, 2001 to 2010, and I've written down the essay title. So for example, discuss the roles of sodium channels, blah blah blah, and I've linked it to the topic using the linky databasey feature within Notion. And therefore, when I click on the topic, I can immediately see all of the different essays that have ever been asked about that topic. And if I wanted to, I could click on one of them and I can what I've been doing is I've been assigning different essays to different students, which means that they each like do one essay, but they do different ones so that we can all put their essays into a shared Google Drive. And that means that every individual student gets to revise from 10, but only has to do one. And this is a thing that I encourage amongst the students.
That is awesome. It's like a master tag database, right?
Yeah, master tag database. So yeah, I think that kind of concludes the main tour. And I guess we can kind of go into the Q&A, because I don't know if people will have questions about this sort of stuff, but
yeah, this is awesome. Thank you so much for the tour. We've got, a bunch of questions have popped in. So let's go through and let's see how many of them are on topic.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. I just need to reset the camera.
No problem.
Yeah, the slightly annoying thing about Sony cameras, and actually most mirrorlesses, is that you can't record for longer than half an hour, and so you have to reset the camera every now and then. And then you get those moments where you forget to reset it, and you're like, "No, I've been filming for ages."
Oh no!
It's all gone.
Brutal. Okay. Let's. This one got quite a few votes, so let's start at the top here. I heard that you know someone who became top 2 in Cambridge using only active recall questions as notes. Can you go into more detail in terms of how he did it? Also, how can you use Notion as an active recall tool? I know we covered some of that, but I'll let you.
Okay. Yes. I actually have something for this. Here we go. So if we take notes, for example, so this is the video that I might be filming tonight/tomorrow that kind of goes over this in much more detail. But essentially, the tactic that my friend used is that as he was going through his lecture notes, all he did was just write questions for himself. And this is the list of 91 questions that he wrote for the topic of nerves. So this came about because I gave a talk at the university in 2015 when I was in my 3rd year of med school, studying all this psychology stuff about how to study effectively. And in that talk, I talked about this idea of active recall and how it's just the best thing ever. And my friend was a 1st-year medical student at the time, and he really took that to heart. So from that point onwards, he didn't write any notes. He literally just wrote questions for himself. He didn't even write the answer to the questions. He just wrote questions.
Wow.
So what are some roles of the cell membrane? What's ballistic control? But basically, like going through the lecture notes and going through the textbook and converting everything into questions. And so when he was studying for his exams, which he was only doing about 2 months before the actual exam, he would just go through these questions and kind of dredge up the answers in his head. So really like actively recall the stuff. And if there was anything he didn't know the answer to, he would kind of mark it in red, which you can do in Notion because you can change colors of stuff, which is nice. He was actually using Microsoft Word because this was a few years ago before Notion was around. So for example, you can mark it with pink, and then at the end of his recall session, he would kind of go back and then he would look in the lecture notes or in the textbook or he would just Google ballistic control. And then he would know, oh, okay, that's what ballistic control is, and that would be that. And I think this is fantastic because we as students waste an enormous amount of time in making notes and summarizing content when we really don't need to. Like, especially for something like medicine, where legions of people before you have summarized content in the form of revision guides and textbooks and on Google and Wikipedia. There is no need to reinvent the wheel and make our own notes unless there is genuinely an area in which we can't find a good summary already available. And so this is essentially the method. So he's got these sort of hundreds of these questions for everything. And by just going through these 2 months before the exam and consistently, he ranked like 2nd in the year and came top in some of the subjects.
That is very cool.
And that's what the video is going to be on. So I need to figure out like a sufficiently clickbaity title, like how my friend ranked 1st in medical school, or something like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. A question that came in, and I'd be curious your opinion on this, because I know that you said there's some Google Doc sharing that happens between the students. Someone said, can I upload Google Docs in Notion so I don't have to copy and paste notes to transfer over?
Yeah, you can. You can link to the Google Docs. So what we do for our videos that I plan with my teammate Christian is that, let's see, where are we? Yeah, we would take like, and we would take a video or a blog post, and he would just link to it over here. So at this point, I can open the Google Doc link and blah blah blah. It's all here. So actually, we still use Google Doc for collaboration. We don't use Notion. Even though you can sort of replace Notion with Google Docs with Notion, we still think the features that Google Docs has are a little bit better. Also, my Mac's about to run out of battery, so I need to grab the charger for it. If you don't mind giving me 10 seconds.
No worries.
I've got a charger plugged in, but for some reason it's not providing any juice.
Uh-oh. I'll see if there's any other questions I can answer outside of the student side of things. There was a question that came in about using Notion for project management. We are going to do a whole office hour specifically on managing projects because there's definitely lots of nuance there in terms of sharing your space and managing tasks across a team. So we'll definitely go into a bit more detail on that. Some people ask about previously recorded sessions. Yes, you can see any of these. They are posted onto Notion's YouTube channel. And also if you click on Notion's name at the top of the Crowdcast, very top of the screen, you'll be able to see all of the past events and you can register and check out any of those.
We're charging yet? No, we're not charging.
Oh no.
It's not working. Oh,
battery dies. Other apps, somebody asked, Anna said, do you still use other apps? Has Notion replaced them all? I'm asking because I see Notion as a good note editor aggregator, but not as a habit tracker or powerful to-do list. Hopefully you saw with some of Ali's stuff too, that like the habit tracking is actually quite powerful. I think it just takes a bit more effort to build for yourself. You kind of have to know what Notion can do to be able to build that. So for me personally, Notion has replaced most of my other apps. There's still lots of other productivity apps. Like I think you might have noticed that Ali used Alfred for sort of quick shortcuts and things like that. So we did it. You're charging.
Charging, yeah. The only problem is this cable is tiny, so I actually don't have any room to sit. I'm just going to sit on the floor.
We'll improvise.
Sit on the floor. Improvise, exactly. Okay.
Okay. Can you transfer Microsoft OneNote to Notion? I'm not actually sure about that. Has anyone else here done that? I'm not sure how that works with their import-export features, so I can't speak to that.
Okay, we're back.
Okay, cool.
Weird microphone and setup. Oh my god. Okay, here we go. I've been intending for ages to buy more than one USB-C charger for my MacBook, but I've never got around to it.
Oh, all good. Okay, so someone asked, does someone use Notion for taking notes in an actual class? So I don't know if you do that when you're in a class. Are you taking notes or directly?
So I actually take notes by hand. By hand, I mean using my iPad Pro and Apple Pencil usually on Notability. Because there is some evidence that taking notes by hand is more effective for recall and stuff and for understanding than taking notes or typing. Plus, I also think that when you're taking notes by hand, it forces you to prioritize stuff. Whereas I found that on the occasions where I've tried to type out notes, I've been just effectively transcribing the lecture without thinking about it.
So true.
And kind of probably annoying everyone sitting around me and the of the typing. Calm down. So I tend to take notes by hand. That's
a great tip. I'll do that with when I'm taking an online course too, and I'm listening to modules. I'll just kind of have a Remarkable tablet that's like pencil, and I can export that into Notion later. And that's helpful. Another great question. So I'm a year 1 dental student with a packed lecture, tutorial, lab schedule, and frequent exams. My study method currently is just cramming for each exam in turn, as they're often 1 week apart. I've watched Ali's super helpful videos on different study techniques and on using Notion, but worry that I don't have time to incorporate them. I'm at a loss as to how I should go about studying and would appreciate any tips. Thank you.
Okay, so this is quite a common question that I get from everyone, because almost everyone studying anything thinks that they've got too much content to cover. Like I get messages from people doing O-levels or GCSEs saying, oh my God, there's too much content. And then they go to A-level and think, oh my God, there's too much content. And then they get to university and they're like, oh my God, there's too much content. So everyone has this issue of feeling like there is too much content. So firstly, what I'd say to this person is that you're definitely not alone. Secondly, what I'd say is that every university does the course slightly differently. So if you do have an exam every single week that you then have to cram for, then yeah, there's not a lot you can do other than just cram for the exam. I would suspect that you probably have holidays and you probably have weekends, and you can use that time to kind of go over old material. But because every university is different, I think the main advice would be to ask people who are in years above you and ask them how they did it. Like find the guy who came second or third or first in the year, and say, hey, what sort of techniques did you use? One thing that I think Tim Ferriss often suggests is that when you're doing stuff like that, don't ask the person who came first, because it would be sort of like asking Michael Phelps for advice about swimming. Like it would be useful, but you know that he's got a lot of advantages that you probably don't. He's got like a ridiculously big wingspan and all that stuff. Whereas if you look at the guy who came second in the Olympics, you can probably find a lot more interesting things. So there was a guy who came, some Singaporean short guy who came second in one of the races, and he was using this like total immersion swimming method, and that was like, oh my god, this is revolutionary. So despite not having the natural advantages that Michael Phelps did, he was able to do very well. But yeah, that just kind of apply that concept and find people that you know that you can be friends with who will be happy to give you advice. And it's generally a very flattering thing for students, for senior students, to get advice, to get asked in a nice way from juniors, like how they did their thing. Like provided you aren't kind of rude about it, you know, people are going to be more than happy to share their stuff with you. Like, you know, I love doing stuff like this where I'm sharing my nerdy Notion organization stuff. Everyone I know who does well in exams also loves sharing how they got there, because they want other people to do well. So that's what I would suggest.
Awesome. Another one, Kelly asked, I'm a PhD student who's trying to set up Notion as a knowledge base for the long term, but with a short-term focus on using it to study for exams. Do you have suggestions on how to set up Notion for studying for comprehensive exams that involve knowledge-specific articles, theories with the author and year in addition to content?
Okay. I probably wouldn't use Notion for that. I would probably, or sort of, I would use something that makes it easy to actively recall stuff. So Notion does that to an extent if you do the toggle feature, but what you probably want is a flashcard app that's more designed for that. So something like Anki is what I would recommend, where you can create your flashcards of papers and references and years and stuff, and you can commit those to memory in that sense. I wonder if I've still got my one, because this is exactly what I did in my third year when I was doing psychology, and in my second year of medical school, where I had to learn loads of paper references. Here we go. Yeah. So what I've done here, what I've done, I've got a video on my YouTube channel about it. It's called the essay memorization framework. Is that I've got references to papers on one side of the flashcard, and then I've got the description of what that study said in the other half. So Bichara 1995, Brown 2000, Brown 2000, blah blah blah, all of this. For various different essays that I was doing stuff in, and to the point where I was even kind of memorizing entire whole paragraphs. So for example, this is short-term memory versus long-term memory, case study number 1, medial temporal lobe, and this is just some stuff that I committed to memory so that I could then add in the exam. So using something like Anki is probably what I'd recommend. You could do it in Notion using the toggle feature, but the nice thing about Anki is that then when you're testing yourself, you can show the answer and then you can choose how frequently this is going to come back. So if I knew the answer, I'd go good. If I didn't know the answer, I'd make it come back again. And you can kind of get through a lot of stuff really quickly here, and it forces us to actively recall. So I'd probably recommend using Anki rather than Notion for that.
That's cool. Engineering student using Notability on an iPad for note-taking during class and working out practice homework problems. Currently back up my notes to G Drive where I can view them as a PDF. Do you know of any way to integrate them with Notion as a file organization system? My biggest struggle with using Notion for long-term notes is that many of my classes have complex formulas that I can't type out in a typical note app.
Yeah, in that sense, I wouldn't use Notion. If I were studying maths, I probably wouldn't use Notion for note taking, because yeah, you can write equations in LaTeX, but it's a real pain in the bum compared to writing that by hand.
Yeah.
If you want to have formulae, like, so for example, you can. What I did was kind of like screenshot stuff and shove it into Notion. I had a few where I'd kind of written stuff by hand in Notability, or so this was a Notability PDF that I highlighted in Notability, and then I just screenshotted it and put it into Notion. But it's probably not what it wouldn't be my tool of choice if I was studying engineering or maths.
Good point. Someone did ask if they could see your dashboard page.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've been trying to write reviews for all the books that I read, and so this is an easy link to that. This is again sort of the Kanban board. No status: reading, finished reading, review draft, review complete. So these are the reviews that I've done so far for fiction books. And just having it on the dashboard encourages me to be like, it kind of reminds me, because sometimes I forget that I'm supposed to write book reviews for books. I'm like, oh damn, okay, let me write some reviews. And so this is usually what I have as the first stop on my workspace rather than Notion office hours. So when I open up Notion, I go on this and I think, okay, what is something productive I can be doing with my time right now?
So your dashboard seems like something that you would probably keep fairly up to date. So it's sort of like the things that you want to keep top of mind, and that might change up depending on your project priority.
Yeah, I guess so. I haven't changed this in a while. Usually this is fairly static, but I suppose what I should do here is have a link to my sponsored videos just to make sure I'm on top of those. And yeah, I mostly just use this as a quick links to things that are good, quick links to write stuff.
That's cool. Let's see. Master's student planning their thesis. I have many side projects I'm passionate about. Any tips on an ultimate database that I can put everything together?
Yeah, so you should go on fortelabs.co and read all of Tiago Forte's stuff about building a second brain. A lot of it's free. There's also a really, really expensive online course that you can take. You probably can't afford it. That's fine. Read all of his blog posts. You can basically create the system from that. And I probably wouldn't use Notion for it. I'd probably use Evernote because Notion is still not quite there, whereby it's still got some issues with offline. It's still got some issues with search and with being able to capture stuff easily into it. And so I still use Evernote for sharing, so kind of like the comprehensive database of stuff. So I have like an inbox, and then I have different notebooks for each of the topics that I'm interested in. So for example, productivity, I take photos from kind of my handwritten notes, and I've got various bits from various blog posts and podcasts and stuff. So if I were actually, so the way I kind of describe it is like, for my second brain, I use, for the capture stuff, I use Bear or Drafts because Notion is not very good for capturing. For refinery, I use Notion, and then for like long-term storage, for like the hard drive, I use Evernote. And it would be really nice if Notion did everything, but we're not yet at the point where a single app can just do everything amazingly well. And so I have no problem with switching between different apps for different contexts. But yeah, Evernote as like long-term storage for all of the things. Alternatively, there's a really good website called The Sweet Setup. And the guy who runs it, Sean Blanc, has a really good course on how to use Ulysses, the app. This is only for Mac, I think. But there are some screencasts he's got on there, which are like all about how people use Ulysses for this, just keeping their overall library of everything they've ever produced and everything they've ever read. And that's really cool. So you might want to look into that.
That's cool. I like that distinction too, because I feel like in Notion, things are more active and I'm accessing the data that I'm saving more frequently, whereas Evernote almost felt like a digital filing cabinet where I would store stuff, but I didn't go back as often. So I think that's actually a really good distinction. Sometimes you still need to store that info, but Notion feels a bit more active to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that classic joke that Evernote is a write-only database because you don't look at that stuff again.
It has its uses, right? How do you use Notion to work on your essays, and how do you use the Cornell method in Notion?
Okay, I don't use Notion to work on essays. If I were doing essays, I'd be using Evernote for that, because again, Evernote is just it's a lot easier to kind of drop stuff into Evernote than it is to drop stuff into Notion. And when we're writing essays, we kind of need to grapple a lot with the topic. And so actually, like if I were writing an essay today, what I'd do is in Evernote, I'd make a notebook, like a hot notebook. This is again something that Dave talks about in his course, Rite of Passage. So I'd make a new hot notebook being like sort of essay title. And then I would include all of my existing notes and just kind of drag and drop them into this essay title notebook. And I'd be making different notes for each of the different sources that I've got. And then I would make a master note where I've got the actual essay and I've kind of put it all together based on each of these other notes. So I wouldn't use Notion for that at all. I don't think Notion has the speed or the features that Evernote does for that particular use case. Yeah. I can't remember if there was a second The Cornell method for note taking?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so the Cornell method is basically what I've done here. Cornell method says that anytime you write something, you write a question next to it. In Notion, however, when you write stuff, you can write the question as a toggle. So, for example, why does blood flow?
Right.
Would be a toggle. What is Darcy's law? And then I've included the thing here. So I'm sort of doing Cornell method, but with toggles rather than left and right, like a table as it was traditionally.
Cool. Other than notes, what do you use Notion for related to medicine? Do you use it for the portfolio? Med student here. I mean,
I
yeah.
don't really. I thought I started to initially, but I'm so bad at keeping on top of my portfolio that I just haven't yet. But I probably would. It would be a good use case for Notion. And I think I did actually have somewhere in the private bit like a sort of medicine case. Here. So I've got reflection and I've got a today I learned thing, which I sort of ages ago I thought about doing, but I'm not going to click on reflections because I'm not sure how confidential the information is.
Right.
But yeah, it's a use case that I do need to use more often, and I'd probably recommend using it to keep on top of stuff, and then you can just copy and paste it into your e-portfolio very easily.
Right. Lauren asked about, can we have a copy of your Notion to see how you have it set up? Basically, we can't really share, our own data because it's, again, there's usually very personal data in there. So I think you have provided a couple really great templates. The Notion template library is full of amazing templates that you can load in. These office hours, I think, also provide lots of chances for you to kind of recreate it yourself. I think it's going to be more valuable if you recreate your own system based on your own needs, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for kind of watching screencasts of other people's Notion setups, but I would feel very scared about actually just giving wholesale someone access to my Notion thing just because I don't know what weird stuff I've got in there.
Yeah.
Notion for a few personal things, like I've started making a personal CRM, so like keeping track of meetings that I've had with my friends and what they're doing and what their relationship problems are and stuff, just so I can kind of. But it's not the sort of stuff I'd want in the public domain.
And it takes a lot of effort to kind of. It's like the data, it's not useful unless there's data in there. And so then it would take a lot of time to clear out that data to put even placeholder data in there. So I think it's a bit tricky to try to, share that with people publicly. Yeah, is there a way to embed your Google Calendar without having to make it public to everyone? I mean, I don't think you can't, you can embed your calendar. I think you do have to make it public. So I don't think there's a way around that. Notion's calendaring system is not, it's just not really there. So any time sensitive stuff, I just use Google Calendar for that. I don't even try to work that into my space. I don't know about, I know you don't seem to have
Notion as a calendar at all. I think its calendar view is useful if you like looking at stuff in calendar format, but it's not a calendar replacement, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Can you use Notion for coding for code snippets? Yep, there is a code. There is a code snippet, and you can hit Command E, and that will turn a block into code. And there's lots of different language options in there too. JavaScript, HTML, you name it. There's lots of possibilities there. I know a lot of technical teams will use it in their documentation, how we do things, GitHub repos, things like that. Okay. There you go. Someone said, could Ali please speak a little louder and have his keyboard be a little quieter? Too late.
People saying lectures as well.
Sorry about that, folks. Sister's looking to use Notion as a team management tool. Could you share more about how it could be used that way? Again, I think we'll go into more detail on that in a future office hours, because I think there's lots of nuances when it comes to collaborating with teams. But Ali, I know you have a podcast, you have other projects where you collaborate with other people. Are there instances in your space here where you have shared spaces that you are collaborating with others?
Yeah, so actually this whole workspace bit is shared with the people who help me with stuff. So recently I've hired a full-time head of content called Christian from Romania. So he's really good. So he's got access to all of this stuff. And then in the private bit, I keep kind of sort of like personal things like my kind of gym tracking and my personal CRM. But for example, let's see, here are some of the ongoing projects that we've got just in general. So main channel, appendix, second channel, website, social, other, blah, blah, blah. And so, for example, I had this idea of maybe getting to streaming. This has been on my mind for a few months now. I just wrote a few notes. And then he commented basically saying that it's a bad idea to try and become a streamer. So this is sort of how we use it to collaborate. We also use this assigning feature. So, for example, how to learn anything with the Feynman method. So Christian wrote the script for that initially, linked it in Google Docs, and I've been editing it earlier today. Please avoid watching Thomas Frank's video on this, as I don't want us to be super distracted over here. This is an absolute classic problem that, like, I can never watch a Thomas Frank video because I know that I'm just gonna implicitly kind of end up stealing ideas from it, and I want to avoid that. And I think Matt Diavella recently said that in one of his videos, that he avoids watching anything from anyone in that space because you just can't. Yeah,
not be influenced. Yeah.
Yeah, like I made a video on how to study for exams, and then like a year later I saw Thomas Frank's and I was like, damn, that's really good. Why did I do that? Yeah. So this is the sort of ways we use it as for team-based things.
Very cool. Yeah, there's lots of nuances, I think, when it comes to setting up things for teams, especially we've had some people ask about, oh, can I share certain columns of information or only certain entries? And that it gets a little bit tricky there in terms of the sharing. So yeah, we'll go into a bit more detail in a future episode. Is there any way to get ideas down faster? I migrated from Evernote a few months ago. While I love the aesthetic and the interfunctionality between pages, the biggest disadvantage is there isn't any quick notes feature. There isn't a true offline mode. Both of these mean it often takes a long time to get a new idea down. It sounds like you were saying like you will still use Evernote for your quick.
Yeah, so I tend to use Draft and Bear for that. So Drafts, because it's got a really good app for the Apple Watch that I can sort of just press on the widget and then kind of dictate into it if I'm taking notes from a podcast while I'm in the car, for example. And Bear just because it's got a really nice writing interface. And so this is how I quick capture stuff. And then every now and then I'll go through my inbox on Drafts or on Bear and either convert it and either transfer it to Evernote or transfer it to Notion, depending on what I need to do with it. But yeah, I agree. It would be lovely if Notion had a better kind of
quick
offline
capture.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like you don't know where something lives across these different apps? Because they do have like similar functionality, but still kind of different. Is that ever an issue, or do you feel like you have a pretty good groove?
I think I've got a pretty good groove. I think in general, Evernote for long-term storage and Notion for currently active things is kind of the way I do it. But yeah,
cool.
I think there is, like, I did kind of start experimenting with this like personal wiki, where I would just kind of write a few bits for different things that I cared about, like happiness, and then this thing about gratitude tracking that was on Praxis blog and stuff. But I think I've got most of this in Evernote as well, because I realized, like, I really wanted to switch everything to Notion, so I kind of went all in with it, and then realized very quickly that it's just not quite there.
Is it possible to take handwritten notes with iPad on Notion?
No, it is not. But you can take them in Notability and screenshot them if you really want to. But yeah, I don't know why you'd want to. Sort of like writing equations and stuff.
Do you use Bear only for long form writing?
Pretty much. I use Drafts if I need to capture something very, very quickly because it's quicker, slightly quicker, like by a few milliseconds. I use Bear if I'm kind of writing out a script for a video or something, or writing out an email newsletter.
I think some of these questions are probably fairly similar. Graphic design student said, I understand the benefit of Notion for project and assignment management, yet I've heard it's not the best for quick task additions. How do you handle on-the-fly end of class assignments?
Yeah, so if I've got like individual tasks that need to be done, I use actually use Todoist for that stuff. So I'd use Notion for kind of ongoing projects, whereas I'd use Todoist for kind of quick things here and there, like reminding me to call my grandma every other day and reminding me to water the plants every week. I started using it a little bit to sort of track sponsored videos, but then I realized very quickly that actually that's not what Todoist is good for these kind of long-term projects. In fact, let's delete all of that stuff. I tend to just use it for sort out home insurance and sort of hypnotherapy thing and water the plants and call my grandma and send a meter reading to my electricity company and stuff like that. I also have like a recurring task that it reminds me that I need to publish an email newsletter every week. So
And yeah, Kimberly, I do all of this in Notion too. So like I have a daily journal, a weekly journal, and then projects. And so inside of every project, I have all of the tasks associated with that project that also shows up on my dashboard. So you can, again, you kind of have to design it the way that you want it. It is possible, but I think it really depends on your workspace. Okay. Yeah, we saw your dashboard. A lot of people asking about, do you use OneNote or Notion when you're scoping subjects?
So I think that's a reference to one of my recent videos where, just to make a point, I didn't use Notion for that. I used OneNote for it. And the point that I was making is that it really doesn't matter. If I had to choose, I'd probably go for Notion rather than OneNote. But I mean, a lot of people prefer OneNote because you can do handwriting in it, and it works nicely with iPads and Microsoft Surfaces, and it's a bit quicker than Notion, and it's got very good offline functionality. So it kind of depends on what your use cases are. If I were a full-time student and not just doing student stuff on the side, maybe I'd use OneNote, maybe I'd use Notion. I don't actually know. Try it out, see what you like.
Yeah. There's no right answer. Someone said, back to grabbing the template, how can I delete the content that's there already and create my own? I'm new to Notion and still learning. I would recommend checking out like Notion's own documentation is really amazing. You can go click on that question mark in the bottom right-hand side and just get a feel for some of the basics, but you can highlight anything and hit delete. So if you're talking about like the resonance calendar, for example, you can open up that template, highlight whatever you want. It'll highlight the block here, and you can just hit the backspace, click delete, and start adding your own stuff right away. It's very easy. Okay. Hi, Ali. Thanks for all you do. Your content's amazing. My question is there a link to all these commands and shortcuts that you use in Notion, for example, the toggle? I think people forget that all of that is like bottom right-hand side. There's like the question mark there, and all of those keyboard shortcuts are one click away. And if you are using Notion, I really do recommend getting familiar with those because they are going to speed up your workflow so much.
Yeah, or you can just hit the slash key and it gives you all the options. So I think earlier I tried doing slash snippet, but then that wasn't a thing. So I thought slash code, and okay, that's what the command is. So
it's very intuitive, right?
Very, very intuitive things. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely get familiar with those shortcuts. They will save you tons of time. Note, you cannot draw and sketch in Notion. Someone asked, if you accidentally delete the headings, workspace or private, how do you create new ones? So actually, you don't, those aren't actually headings that you can delete, right?
Yeah, they're just, you've got your workspace and you've got private.
Yeah, you can like click on it to minimize it.
So maybe if you thought you deleted them, you've actually just collapsed it.
Right. Hopefully that clarifies, Josh. Cool. I think we covered a good chunk. Someone said, Ali, can you interact more with your Discord server?
I mean, I would, but I'm currently doing this live stream.
Sorry. Right. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions that I think we covered a good chunk of them. There were a lot of overlap in some of those questions there. But any final questions for Ali before we wrap up this office hours? Someone said, how do you combine your workflow with Notion, Notability, Bear, and Ulysses? I mean, I think we sort of covered a bit of that. It just seemed like it's based on the function, right? Like, am I trying to, is it a quick note? Is it a draft? Like, what is it? And then you kind of have the tool that best suits what you're looking to do. Cool. Yeah, I hope that was helpful for folks. I really, really appreciate you showing the behind the scenes. If you are not familiar with Ali's videos, there is a link at the bottom here, Ali Abdaal on YouTube. I have learned a ton from your videos. I've learned a ton from your Skillshare course on video editing. And so like, I love what you're up to. I think it's really awesome how much you share about how to be better, how to be a better student, how to be better at productivity. So many thanks to you.
It's been fun, and I've been enjoying your various screencasts with various people.
Yeah, it's so fun to see how other people work and think and what tools. Yeah, do you ever sleep? That is a question I was also curious about. Yeah, how do you get it all done?
Yeah, I've been struggling. I need to say no to more things now. But yeah,
I think also something that your space showed is that like you said, some of your habits were lacking around like the working out. It's like not everything always takes. There's just not room for everything to.
Yeah, definitely. And I quite like that idea of having different seasons of life. So, for
Yes.
example, like over the past few weeks, I've been struggling because I recently took on this responsibility of teaching physiology, and therefore I had to relearn it all myself while having the job and while doing the YouTube stuff. But they're going on Christmas holidays in 2 weeks' time, so I'm going to be like, oh, that's fine. I can now look after my health a bit more.
It's like the strategic imbalance, right? It's like some seasons we know are going to be a little bit crazier than others, and
yeah, strategic
kind of
imbalance.
adapt.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good phrase. I'm going to write that in Notion.
Awesome.
Idea refinery, strategic imbalance. Sick.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And next week, we're going to be talking about Notion on the personal side and doing some bullet journaling. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And if you want to chat more, come join my Discord server. I'm just going to see if I can.
Yeah, post the link in the sidebar.
How do I find a link? Invite people. I'm still new to this Discordy thing. I don't want it to expire. No limit. Oh, here we go. Okay, I'm going to paste a link here. You're in Discord server. Have a chat. I've been wasting so much time today just kind of chatting to people.
It's all part of the process, right?
It's all part of the process, yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
Cool. Good stuff. See you later, Marie. Thanks
See you later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.